The alien princess spotted me, turned to her friends, and said, "I'm going to wed this man Marcus." The Earth ambassador stood quietly at the entrance of the bustling intergalactic trade hub, surrounded by the vibrant activity of various alien species. This station, located in the heart of the Milky Way, was a place where countless cultures and races met to negotiate, trade, and share knowledge. As a human among beings from distant worlds, Marcus always felt a little out of place, but he had grown used to it. His role as an ambassador was important, and he understood the complexities of intergalactic diplomacy. On this particular day, Marcus was attending a diplomatic event that was unlike any other he had experienced before. Alien delegates mingled in groups, their voices creating a buzz that filled the large, metallic hall. Brightly colored banners from different planets hung overhead, and various exotic smells filled the air as refreshments were served. But amidst all this, something felt different. It was as though the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Marcus glanced around, trying to stay focused on his mission. He needed to speak with the representative from the Orion system about trade routes, but something kept pulling his attention away from the conversation. It was as if an invisible force was drawing him toward one corner of the room. He turned, his eyes scanning the crowd. That's when he saw her. She stood across the room, surrounded by a group of her own people, her presence almost overwhelming. She was beautiful, unlike anything Marcus had ever seen before. Her skin shimmered with a soft, otherworldly glow, reflecting the colors of the room in a way that made it seem as though she was glowing from within. Her hair, long and silver, cascaded down her back like liquid starlight. Her eyes, though, were what truly captivated Marcus. They were large, almond-shaped, and glowing with an intensity that seemed to pierce right through him. The moment their eyes met, Marcus felt a strange, almost magnetic pull. He had encountered countless alien species during his time as an ambassador, but nothing compared to the way this woman made him feel. It wasn't just her beauty. It was something deeper, something that spoke to him on a level he couldn't quite explain. For a moment, neither of them moved. Time seemed to slow. The noise of the room faded into the background, and all Marcus could focus on was her gaze, locked onto his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. Her lips parted slightly, as if she were about to say something, but instead she turned her head toward the group standing beside her. Marcus blinked, suddenly feeling self-conscious, and looked down at his feet. What was going on? Was he imagining things? He had no idea why this woman had such a strong effect on him, but it felt like nothing he had ever experienced before. He had to shake it off. But before he could fully regain his composure, the alien princess turned back to him. This time, her voice rang out clearly, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. She spoke in a language that Marcus didn't fully understand, but her words were loud and clear enough for him to catch the meaning. "I'm going to wed this man," she said, her voice firm and full of certainty. Marcus froze, his heart racing. What did she just say? The room seemed to go silent for a moment. He could see the surprise on the faces of the people around her, her companions looking at one another in shock. But the princess stood tall, unmoved, as if her statement was the most natural thing in the world. The murmurs of the crowd quickly turned into hushed whispers. Marcus felt all eyes on him, and he could feel his face turning red. Was she serious? Surely this was some sort of joke, right? But the look in her eyes told a different story. She wasn't joking. She wasn't asking for his permission or even giving him a chance to respond. She was stating a fact. "I'm going to wed this man," she repeated, this time more firmly. Her gaze never wavered from Marcus, and in that moment he felt a mixture of confusion and curiosity wash over him. What could this mean? Why would she choose him, a human of all people? Marcus quickly glanced around the room, hoping for some sort of explanation or a sign that this was just some elaborate misunderstanding. But the faces of the other aliens remained unreadable, their expressions shifting between disbelief and intrigue. No one seemed to know how to respond. Before he could gather his thoughts, the princess turned her back to him and began to walk toward the group that had been standing with her. Her confidence was undeniable, and the crowd parted as she moved. The room had fallen into an uncomfortable silence, and everyone seemed to be waiting for Marcus to react. But what could he say? He had never been in a situation like this before. What was happening? Why had this alien princess singled him out in such a bold way? He had heard stories of powerful alien leaders making marriages for political alliances, but this felt different. It was personal, and it was happening to him. Marcus swallowed hard, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of the situation. His diplomatic training told him to stay calm, to not react impulsively. But his heart was pounding in his chest, and he could feel his palms growing sweaty. As he stood there still in shock, the princess's words echoed in his mind. "I'm going to wed this man." What did that mean for him? What did that mean for Earth? Could he refuse? Would there be consequences? Marcus glanced back at the ambassador from the Orion system, who was now looking at him with a mixture of amusement and concern. He had no idea what to do. All he knew was that the events that had just unfolded in front of him would change the course of his life forever. And deep down, as confused as he was, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Marcus stood in the middle of the grand hall, his mind spinning with confusion. The moment the alien princess, Arlena, had declared that she was going to marry him, everything around him had shifted. People in the room had turned to look at him, their expressions a mix of shock, curiosity, and silent judgment. He could feel their eyes on him, waiting for him to react. But what was there to say? How could he respond to something like that? He wasn't a prince or even a powerful political figure. He was just an Earth ambassador, a man who had spent his life navigating the complexities of intergalactic diplomacy. How could he possibly be the one chosen by the princess? Why him, of all people? The questions buzzed in his head, refusing to be ignored. As the whispers and murmurs around him began to rise, Marcus turned to see Arlena walking back toward her companions, her confidence unwavering. She had spoken her words with such authority that no one dared question her. It was clear that she was not asking for permission or seeking approval. This was a declaration. She had made her choice. The alien delegates who had been part of the conversation had fallen into silence, their eyes darting between Marcus and the princess. No one seemed willing to speak up, as if they were waiting for Marcus to make the first move. He couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened, something far beyond his control. For a moment, he thought about leaving. Just walking out of the room, finding a quiet space to think and regroup. But he knew that wasn't an option. He had been thrust into the center of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. He had no idea what this meant for his role as an ambassador or for his future. After what seemed like an eternity, the quiet was broken by the voice of the Orion representative, who stepped forward with a forced smile. "Ambassador Marcus," he said, his tone polite but tinged with a hint of amusement. "It seems you have been chosen for a very unique honor." Marcus looked at the representative, but the words felt hollow. "Honor," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is not an honor, this is—" His thoughts stumbled. What could he say? What was he supposed to feel? He had never imagined anything like this would happen. The Orion representative chuckled softly, but it was clear that he didn't fully understand the weight of the situation. "Of course, Ambassador, I imagine this is quite overwhelming. But I think you'll find that the princess's choice is not one to be taken lightly. She is not a woman who acts on a whim." Marcus turned away from the group, feeling a sense of unease wash over him. The weight of the situation seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. He was in the midst of an intergalactic diplomatic crisis, and he had no idea how to navigate it. As he walked away from the group, trying to find a moment of peace, he couldn't help but glance back at Arlena. She stood with her companions, her eyes locked on him, her expression unreadable. There was something in her gaze that felt different. It wasn't just the intense curiosity he had seen earlier. It was something deeper, something that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. The thought made Marcus uneasy. What if this wasn't just a matter of politics or tradition? What if Arlena's decision had personal stakes for her people? The princess of the Zorathian Empire was not someone who made decisions lightly, and Marcus knew that her intentions were not easily understood. The next few days were a blur of meetings and discussions. Marcus tried to focus on his duties as Earth's ambassador, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the princess. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had been dragged into something far bigger than himself. Was this just a political alliance, or was there something more to Arlena's decision? He learned that the Zorathian Empire was one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy, and Arlena was its heir. Her choice to marry was not a simple matter of love or desire. It was a deeply political act. The union between her and a human would be a symbol of unity, a message to the galaxy that the Zorathian Empire was open to new alliances, even with humanity. But as much as he tried to understand the political ramifications, Marcus couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was more to it. Arlena had made her choice, but what did it mean for him? Did he have any say in this? Was he truly free to make his own decision? His thoughts were interrupted when he was called to a meeting with the Zorathian leadership. Arlena's father, the Emperor, was waiting for him. The Emperor was a towering figure, his skin a deep metallic hue that reflected the light like polished steel. His presence was commanding, and it was clear that he had the power to shape the fate of entire civilizations. "Ambassador Marcus," the Emperor said, his voice deep and resonant, "I trust you are adjusting to the unusual circumstances of your visit." Marcus stood before him, feeling small in the presence of the powerful ruler. "Your Majesty," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I'm doing my best, but I must admit I find myself in a rather difficult position." The Emperor nodded thoughtfully. "You are not the first to feel this way. Arlena's decision has surprised many, even within our own court. But make no mistake, her choice is not a matter of whimsy. She sees something in you, something unique, and that is why she has chosen you." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "But why me?" he asked, his voice more forceful than he intended. "I'm just a human. I have no place in your empire. I can't be a part of this." The Emperor's gaze softened, and for the first time Marcus saw a flicker of understanding in the ruler's eyes. "You are a symbol, ambassador, a symbol of the potential for unity between our people. Your presence here, your role in our alliance, speaks to something far greater than yourself. Arlena sees this, and she has chosen to act on it." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Marcus was no longer just an ambassador. He was a symbol of something far bigger. And in that moment, he realized that his life would never be the same. The choice was no longer just Arlena's. It was his, too. But what would he choose? What did it mean to be a part of this galaxy-spanning alliance? Would he embrace the path laid out for him, or would he walk away and risk everything? The decision weighed heavily on Marcus's shoulders as he left the Emperor's chambers. He had no answers, no clear direction. But one thing was certain. The future of both humanity and the Zorathian Empire now depended on him. And no matter what happened, he would have to face it head-on. Marcus's life had become a whirlwind of decisions, pressure, and growing uncertainty. Ever since Arlena had declared her intention to marry him, everything around him had shifted. The political implications of her words were enormous, and it felt as though he had been dragged into a game of galactic proportions. He was no longer just an Earth ambassador. Now he was something much more, a symbol of unity, a piece in a much larger puzzle. But Marcus wasn't sure if he was ready for that kind of responsibility. The more he learned about the Zorathian Empire, the more complicated everything became. The empire was ancient, with a history of war, conquest, and political intrigue. Arlena's family had ruled for generations, and her position as heir was more than just a title. It came with power, expectations, and a future that no one, not even Arlena, could escape. Arlena had been kind to him, explaining the deep-rooted traditions of her people, but she was also distant in ways that Marcus couldn't quite understand. She was confident, almost to the point of being unapproachable. She had grown up surrounded by the weight of responsibility, and every word she spoke seemed to come with the knowledge that her choices were not just hers. They were the Empire's choices. Marcus couldn't help but wonder if she had ever had a chance to choose for herself, or if she had always been bound by the expectations of her birth. But as the days went on, Marcus realized that his role wasn't as clear-cut as he had originally thought. There was more to Arlena's choice than just a political alliance. There were deep emotions tied to her decision, emotions she had yet to fully reveal, and it wasn't just her feelings that Marcus had to navigate. The Empire was divided, and many factions were watching to see how this union would unfold. The Zorathian Empire was on the brink of war, with various factions vying for power. Some wanted to preserve the status quo, while others sought to shake things up and take the Empire in a new direction. The alliance with Earth was seen as a potential game-changer, but not everyone was happy about it. There were those who believed that humans, with their relatively short history and lack of spacefaring experience, had no place among the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations. And then there were those who saw the marriage between Arlena and a human as a threat, a challenge to the traditional power structures that had kept the Empire stable for centuries. Arlena had explained to Marcus that their marriage would be a symbol, a way to unite the Empire's factions under a single cause. But Marcus didn't know if that was enough. He didn't want to be a figurehead, a puppet in a game he didn't understand. Yet he couldn't ignore the feelings that had begun to form in him toward her. There was something about her that drew him in, something he couldn't quite explain. She was strong, intelligent, and capable, traits he admired, but there was also a vulnerability beneath the surface, one that she hid well. His thoughts were interrupted when Arlena invited him to visit Zorath, her home planet. She explained that he would need to complete a series of trials if he were to be truly accepted by her people. These trials were ancient traditions, tests of strength, intelligence, and resilience that had been passed down through generations. If Marcus could prove himself worthy, he would earn the respect of the Zorathian people and solidify the alliance between their two worlds. The idea of facing these trials filled Marcus with dread. He wasn't a soldier or a warrior. He was a diplomat, skilled with words and negotiation, not physical combat. But he knew that he couldn't back down. If he wanted to be a part of Arlena's world, and if he wanted to have any chance of truly understanding her, he had to go through with it. A few days later, Marcus found himself standing on the surface of Zorath. The planet was stunning. Its landscapes varied from dense forests to towering mountains, and its skies were painted in hues of purple and gold. But beneath the beauty, there was a harshness to the world. The air was thin, and the planet's gravity was stronger than Earth's. Everything felt more intense here, more alive, and more unforgiving. Arlena led Marcus to the royal palace, a towering structure made of smooth, silver metal that reflected the sun's rays in brilliant flashes. The palace was both majestic and intimidating, a symbol of the Empire's power. As they entered, Marcus couldn't help but feel small in its shadow. He was about to face the trials, and he had no idea what to expect. "The first trial will test your strength," Arlena explained as they walked through the palace halls. "You will need to survive in the toxic jungle for 24 hours. It is a place where even the most skilled warriors have been lost. But you must make it through, or you will not be allowed to continue." Marcus swallowed hard. The toxic jungle. He had heard stories of the dangers that lurked within. It was a place where deadly creatures roamed, and the environment itself was a constant threat. The very air was laced with toxins that could kill a person in minutes if they weren't careful. "But don't worry," Arlena continued, her voice softening. "I will be with you. I won't let you fail." Her words gave him little comfort. He wasn't sure if she meant it out of duty or something else, but he couldn't deny that he felt a deep sense of responsibility to prove himself, not just for her, but for the future of their people. He didn't want to fail. Not here, not now. The next day, Marcus was taken to the edge of the toxic jungle. The dense foliage seemed to pulse with life, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. Arlena handed him a small, silver bracelet that would act as a tracker. "Wear this at all times," she instructed. "It will alert us if you're in danger. But remember, this is your trial. You must face it alone." As Marcus stepped into the jungle, he could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The trees were tall, their branches reaching out like skeletal arms, and the ground beneath his feet was soft, almost like a sponge. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of rot and the promise of danger. He walked carefully, trying to stay alert. Every noise in the jungle felt amplified, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. The deeper he went, the more he could feel the oppressive nature of the place. It was as if the jungle itself was alive, testing him, pushing him to his limits. Hours passed, and Marcus's body began to tire. The heat was unbearable, and the toxins in the air made it hard to breathe. But he kept moving. He had no choice. He couldn't afford to fail. As night fell, the jungle grew even more dangerous. The sounds of strange creatures echoed in the darkness, and Marcus had to use all of his wits to avoid them. His senses were on high alert, and every rustling of leaves made him jump. He knew he couldn't stop. Not yet. At the end of the 24 hours, Marcus stumbled out of the jungle, exhausted, covered in cuts and bruises, but alive. Arlena was waiting for him at the edge, her expression unreadable. "You did it," she said, her voice soft but full of respect. "You've passed the first trial." Marcus collapsed to his knees, his body giving in to the exhaustion he had pushed aside for so long. He had made it through, but he knew that this was just the beginning. The trials were far from over, and each one would be more difficult than the last. But for the first time since arriving on Zorath, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. He had proven to himself that he could survive. And maybe, just maybe, he could do more than just survive. He could thrive in this new world. But the real test had only just begun. The next trial was not what Marcus had expected. After surviving the toxic jungle, he thought that things might become easier, but the Zorathians had other plans. The second trial, Arlena explained, would test his mind rather than his body. This trial would not be about surviving the wilderness, but about surviving the political chessboard of Zorathian society. "Welcome to the Hall of Strategy," Arlena said, leading him into a grand chamber deep within the royal palace. The room was lined with walls of shimmering silver, and the floor was smooth, reflecting the light that filtered through the large, circular windows. At the center of the room, a massive table stood, with strange symbols etched into its surface. On the table were holographic displays, showing moving pieces, maps, and star systems. "This is where the greatest minds of the Empire come to practice the art of diplomacy, negotiation, and war strategy," Arlena explained. "You will face a simulation, a series of decisions that will test your ability to think under pressure and maintain your alliances." Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. The first trial had been physical, something he could prepare for by relying on his instincts. But this was different. This was about outsmarting others, understanding the complex politics of an empire far older and more intricate than anything he had ever encountered. Arlena activated the simulation, and the table came to life with bright, swirling images. It showed a star map of the galaxy, with various planets and star systems marked by glowing points of light. Some of the points were green, indicating friendly factions, while others were red, showing rival forces. The holographic image shifted and zoomed in on one particular system, where two rival factions, one Zorathian and one from the nearby Korathi Empire, were on the brink of war. "The task is simple," Arlena said. "You must navigate this situation and find a way to prevent a full-scale war between the two factions. The Korathi are known for their aggression, and the Zorathians are stubborn and proud. The only way to avoid war is through diplomacy and carefully chosen alliances. Choose wisely, for every decision you make will have consequences." Marcus stared at the hologram, feeling the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. He had always been a negotiator, but this was different. In his previous work as an ambassador, he had never faced the life-or-death stakes that came with galactic warfare. He had only ever dealt with trade routes, cultural exchanges, and economic partnerships. This was a different world entirely. The simulation began, and Marcus was presented with his first choice. The Korathi had made an aggressive move by sending a fleet to the borders of Zorathian space, and the Zorathian Council was divided on how to respond. Some advocated for immediate military action, while others wanted to engage in talks. Marcus thought quickly. He knew that if the Zorathians responded with force, it would only escalate the conflict, and soon both sides would be at war. On the other hand, a diplomatic approach might be seen as weak, and the Korathi might take advantage of the situation. He had to find a balance, a solution that would keep the peace without alienating either side. He selected the option to propose a neutral meeting between the leaders of both factions, with the help of a third party, an independent mediator from a neutral planet. The simulation continued, showing the reactions of the Korathi and Zorathian leaders. The Korathi were skeptical, but they agreed to the meeting, and the Zorathians reluctantly accepted as well. The next few rounds of the simulation grew more complicated. Marcus had to navigate treacherous waters, convincing various factions to cooperate without giving too much away. He was forced to make difficult choices, sometimes sacrificing short-term gains for the long-term peace of the galaxy. Each decision he made came with its own set of consequences, and there were moments when he wasn't sure if he was making the right call. But with each choice, Marcus felt himself growing more confident. He was learning the delicate balance of diplomacy, how to wield power without using force, and how to use words as a weapon in a way that he had never thought possible. It wasn't just about being right. It was about understanding the motivations and fears of the other side, and using that understanding to create lasting peace. Finally, after what felt like hours, Marcus reached the last part of the simulation. The Korathi and Zorathian factions were on the brink of agreement, but there was one final obstacle, an assassination attempt on the Zorathian ambassador, which threatened to derail the entire peace process. Marcus had to act quickly. He could choose to blame the Korathi for the attack, which would escalate tensions, or he could work to find the true culprit, uncovering a third party that was attempting to manipulate both sides into war. Marcus's heart raced as he made his decision. He chose to investigate the assassination attempt and find the true source of the plot. As the simulation progressed, he uncovered a hidden conspiracy involving rogue elements from both the Korathi and Zorathian empires. With the truth revealed, both factions were forced to confront the real threat, an enemy within their own ranks, and a fragile peace was achieved. The simulation ended and the holographic table went dark. Marcus stood still, breathing heavily. He had done it. The trial was over and he had passed. He had managed to avoid war, not through force, but through strategy, diplomacy, and a careful understanding of the complex web of alliances and rivalries that define the galaxy. Arlena stood beside him, watching him closely. "You did well," she said, her voice soft but full of respect. "You passed the second trial." Marcus felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. He had proven himself in the toxic jungle, and now he had navigated the dangerous waters of Zorathian politics. But there was still one more trial left, one that he wasn't sure he was ready for. The final trial would be the most personal of all, a test of his heart, his loyalty, and his willingness to embrace a future he had never imagined. As they left the Hall of Strategy, Arlena turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "The trials are not just about surviving. They are about understanding the strength of character, the resilience of the mind, and the depth of the heart. You have shown that you have all three, Marcus, but there is one last thing you must decide." Marcus looked at her, feeling a sense of uncertainty. "What do you mean?" Arlena paused, her gaze intense. "You must decide if you are truly ready to be with me. To be a part of my world, to stand by my side as we face the challenges ahead. The galaxy is full of danger, but it is also full of opportunity. I cannot promise you an easy life, but I can promise you that together we can change the course of history." Marcus stood there, looking at Arlena. He had already come so far, and yet the decision he faced now was the hardest one yet. Could he truly leave everything behind and step into this new life with her? Could he accept his place in a galaxy so different from his own? For a long moment he didn't speak. The weight of the decision hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. But in the end, Marcus knew that he couldn't walk away. He had already chosen this path, and it was time to face whatever came next. Together, they would face the future. The final trial loomed ahead, and Marcus couldn't shake the weight of the decision that hung over him. After everything he had been through, surviving the toxic jungle, navigating the complex politics of the Zorathian Empire, and proving his worth in the Hall of Strategy, he had come so far. Yet this last trial wasn't something he could prepare for. It was personal. It was about his heart, his future, and his place in the galaxy. Arlena had led him through the first two trials, guiding him with the wisdom and strength that came from years of being groomed for leadership. But now it was his turn to make a choice that would determine his path from here on out. They had returned to the royal palace after Marcus had completed the political trial, and the weight of his success settled on his shoulders. Arlena hadn't said much since then, but there was an undeniable tension between them. She was waiting for him to decide, to make the choice that would not only shape his future, but also the future of the Zorathian Empire. The palace felt colder now, more distant. The echoes of the previous trials still hung in the air. The walls that once seemed welcoming now seemed to close in on him. He had passed the tests, but it felt like they had only just begun. Arlena found him standing in the garden, looking out over the landscape of Zorath. The planet was breathtaking, a world of green forests, towering mountains, and crystal-clear rivers that glittered under the light of the twin suns. It was a world full of beauty, but also full of challenges. The Empire was on the brink of change, and Marcus now stood at the center of it. "You've done well, Marcus," Arlena said softly, walking toward him. Her voice was gentle but firm. She was no longer the princess who had declared her intentions so boldly. Now she was someone who had seen him grow, someone who had shared these trials with him. "I don't know if I've done well, Arlena," Marcus replied, turning to face her. "I've made it through, but I'm not sure what this means. What happens after the trials? What do I do now?" Arlena paused, looking at him with a seriousness that he hadn't seen before. Her gaze held something deeper, something uncertain. "You decide, Marcus. The trials are over. The decision now rests with you. Will you stay here with me and stand by my side as we face the future? Or will you return to Earth, to your old life, and leave all of this behind?" Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. The question was simple, but the answer was. How could he choose between the life he knew and the life that had been thrust upon him? He had never imagined that he would be standing here, with the fate of an empire and the future of an entire galaxy in his hands. He was just a man from Earth, a simple diplomat, but now he had been asked to join the royal family of Zorath, to become a partner in an ancient and powerful empire. For a long time, he didn't speak. He had to think about it, to process everything he had learned over the past few weeks. He had grown fond of Arlena, of her strength and determination, but he also knew that the life she offered him was one of unimaginable responsibility. If he accepted, it would mean a life of constant pressure, political intrigue, and the weight of an empire on his shoulders. It would mean being in the spotlight, always under the watchful eyes of those who sought power. But if he chose to leave, he would be walking away from Arlena, and from the opportunity to help shape the future of not just the Zorathian Empire, but humanity's place in the galaxy. Could he really do that? Could he walk away from everything he had worked for, everything he had come to care about? Arlena stepped closer, her eyes filled with understanding. "I know this isn't easy, but the Empire needs more than just a ruler. It needs someone who can understand its people, someone who can bring about change, someone who can unite the factions. That's what I need, Marcus. But I also need someone who understands the importance of love, of trust. If you're not ready, if this isn't the future you want, then I will not ask you to stay. But if you are, if you want to help me lead, then I promise that we will face everything together." Her words hit Marcus harder than he had expected. It wasn't just about the Empire. It wasn't just about politics or power. It was about something much deeper. It was about partnership, trust, and building a future together. He had come to care for her not just as a ruler, but as a person. He had seen her strength, her determination, and her vulnerability. She wasn't just the princess of Zorath. She was someone who had been carrying the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders alone for far too long. And now she was asking him to join her. Not just as an ally or a political partner, but as someone who could stand by her side, someone she could trust to help lead the Empire into a new age. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He knew that he couldn't go back to Earth. He couldn't walk away from this opportunity, from the chance to be a part of something greater than himself. But he also knew that he couldn't do it alone. He would need Arlena, and she would need him. "I'm ready," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I'm ready to stand by your side, Arlena. I'm ready to help you lead." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, Marcus saw a flicker of relief in her gaze. She had been waiting for this moment for him to make the decision. Now it was finally clear. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "You don't know how much this means." The tension between them melted away, and for a moment the weight of the galaxy seemed to lift. They stood together in the garden, looking out over the vast landscape of Zorath. The twin suns were setting, casting a warm glow over the world. It felt like the beginning of something new, something important. Arlena took Marcus's hand, her grip firm but gentle. "We have a lot of work to do," she said, her voice resolute. "But together we can make a difference. We can change the future." Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of purpose he had never known before. The journey ahead would be difficult. There would be challenges, political battles, and obstacles that seemed insurmountable. But he wasn't afraid. He had found his place in this new world, and he had found his purpose. And as he looked at Arlena standing beside him, he knew that they would face it all together. The future of the Zorathian Empire and the future of humanity's place in the galaxy was in their hands. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt truly ready to embrace it.